The rain did not fall that night. It attacked. Isolde Brennick stood at the foot of the grand marble staircase of Caldermere House, with water already soaking through the thin silk of her traveling gown. And she understood, in the way a person understands bad news before it is spoken, that she was not going to be permitted inside again. The footman who had opened the door for her a quarter of an hour ago now stood beside it, with his gloved hands clasped behind his back and his eyes fixed on the chandelier above her head. He would not look at her. He had been instructed not to look at her. She had been in this house often enough across the last 2 years to know every servant by name, and the fact that Mallory was pretending she was a stranger told her everything she needed to know about what was happening here tonight. "His Grace will see you now, Miss Brennick," said the butler from the landing above, and even his voice had been scrubbed of warmth. She climbed the stairs on legs that did not entirely belong to her. The pearls at her throat felt like a noose. Her hand went to her stomach once, briefly, and then fell away before anyone could see. She had not told him. She had come tonight to tell him. She had the words rehearsed in 3 different orders, depending on his mood, depending on how he looked at her when she walked into the library, depending on whether he kissed her first or waited. The butler opened the door to the private drawing room instead of the library, which was the first cruelty, because the private drawing room was where his father conducted business with strangers. Alistair Caldermere, 7th Duke of Varnholt, stood at the tall window with his back to her and did not turn when the door closed. Isolde waited. She had learned in the 2 years she had known him that when he stood like that, spine drawn as tight as a drawn bow, it meant he was about to say something he had decided was necessary. She had also learned that he was never wrong about what he considered necessary, and that trying to argue with him in those moments was like trying to argue with a closed gate. But she had never been the thing on the other side of the gate before. "You came in the storm," he said. "You sent for me." "I sent for you this afternoon, before the storm. You could have sent word you were delayed. You could have waited until morning." "I did not want to wait." He turned then, and she saw his face, and the small hope she had been carrying for the last 2 hours since the summons arrived at her aunt's townhouse died quietly in her chest, without making a sound. He looked at her, the way a man looks at a ledger that has come up short. "Sit down, Isolde." "I would rather stand." "Sit down." She sat, because her legs were already beginning to fail her, and because the chair he gestured to was the furthest from him in the room, which told her the shape of what was coming before he said a word of it. He did not sit. He stood at the window still, with one hand braced against the frame, and the rain hammered the glass behind him so loudly she had to strain to hear him when he spoke. "There is a letter," he said, "that has been circulating among certain gentlemen of my father's acquaintance for the last fortnight. It concerns you. It concerns us. It concerns the nature of our association and the particulars of certain nights you spent under this roof during my father's absence at Bath." Her stomach turned once, hard. Who wrote it? That is not the relevant question. It is the only relevant question. Someone is lying about me, Isolde. Someone is lying about us. He looked at her then, finally, and there was something in his face she had never seen before and could not name, a thing that looked like grief worn as armor. "No one is lying," he said. "That is the difficulty. The letter is accurate in every particular. It is a truthful account of what we have been to each other, and my father has it now. And the alliance he has spent 6 years constructing with the Thornvale family is therefore in ruins, and I am to be disinherited unless I repudiate you publicly and completely before the end of this week." The room went very still. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She tried again. "Then repudiate me privately," she said. "Send me home. Let me leave the country. I will go to my aunt in Lisbon, and no one will ever hear of me again. and you can stand in whatever drawing room your father requires and tell whatever lies will buy your inheritance back. I will not contradict a single one of them. Alistair, do you hear me? I will go. That is not sufficient. Why not? Because the letter has already been read aloud in a club I do not frequent, by a man I do not know, to an audience that includes my father's closest friend and 2 of the Thornvale cousins. It is no longer a private matter. It is a public one. The only repudiation that will answer is a public one. Then make one. I am making one now. She looked at him. He looked back. And she understood, at last, fully what he had brought her here to do. You want me to leave London, she said, and her voice did not shake, which was a small mercy she did not know she had been granted. Tonight, in the storm. You want me to walk out of this house and never contact you again, and you want me to do it in a manner that allows you to tell your father truthfully that you turned me out yourself. Yes. And when anyone asks what became of me, you will say you do not know. Yes. And when anyone asks whether the letter was true, you will say it was a slander, and that you ended the acquaintance the moment you learned of the rumor. Yes. She stood up. Her hand went to her stomach again, and this time, she didn't take it away in time. And she saw him notice. And she saw him not understand what he had noticed. He thought she was clutching at her corset. He thought she was steadying herself against a blow. He did not know. She had come here tonight to tell him. And now she was not going to tell him, because she understood now that if she told him, he would not let her leave. And if he did not let her leave, his father would destroy him, and she would rather walk alone into 100 storms than be the axe that fell on the only man she had ever loved. So she closed her hand around the small weight of it beneath the silk, and she let him believe what he was going to believe anyway, which was that she was a woman being sent away, and nothing more. Do I have your word that you are choosing this? She asked. Isolde. Do I have your word? He was silent for a very long time. You have my word, he said. Then I will not trouble you again. She walked to the door. Mallory opened it for her without being asked. She walked down the stairs. She walked across the marble entry hall. She walked past the footman who would not meet her eyes and out onto the top step, where the rain hit her like a slap, and she had to grip the railing to keep from going down. A carriage was waiting at the curb. Not her carriage. His. He had summoned it while he was telling her, which meant he had decided all of this before she arrived, which meant every rehearsed version of the words she had practiced on the way here had been useless before she walked through the door. The driver did not ask her where to go. He already knew. She climbed in. The door shut. The horses pulled away, and she looked back only once, and the window of the private drawing room was dark. She had been 23 years old when she first met Alistair Caldermere. She was 25 now. For most of those 2 years, she had believed that she was a woman, being slowly and carefully courted by a man who was not free to court her openly. And she had been right about that. And she had believed that his restraint was a form of tenderness. And she had been wrong about that. His restraint had been a calculation. It had always been a calculation. Tonight's casting out was simply the final entry in a ledger he had been keeping all along. The carriage rolled through streets that ran with water. She did not cry. She had been waiting to cry since the moment he said the word repudiation, and the tears had not come. And she understood now that they would not come tonight, because her body had been keeping its own counsel for the last 3 weeks, and had already decided what mattered and what did not. She pressed her hand flat against her abdomen under the wet silk. He did not know, she said aloud, to no one, to the rain, to the small thing she carried. He sent me away, and he did not know, and he will never know, because if he knew, he would ruin himself for us, and I will not let him. The carriage passed through the high gate of her aunt's townhouse, and the wheel struck a rut, and Isolde Brennick, who had believed for 2 years that she was loved, and who would now have to raise the proof of it alone, braced her hands against the seat and drew the first breath of the rest of her life. She did not sleep. She sat in the window of her aunt's guest room with a blanket around her shoulders and watched the rain turn the lamps of the square into yellow smears. And she thought about the first time Alistair had taken off his gloves in her presence. It had been at a concert. He had been seated beside her by the accident of a reshuffled program, and during the second movement, he had removed his right glove and rested his hand on the arm of his chair, and his smallest finger had brushed hers, and neither of them had moved for the entire remaining 40 minutes of the performance. That had been the beginning. That had been the whole beginning. One uncovered hand in a dim hall, and 2 years of her life, and a child. She thought about the first time he had spoken to her with his guard down, in the library at Caldermere House, 3 months after that concert. He had been reading a letter from his father, and his mouth had tightened, and she had asked him without thinking what was wrong, and he had looked up at her like she had struck him, and then he had said, very quietly, "My father is a man who has never loved anything he could not weigh." And then he had gone back to his letter, and she had understood for the first time why he held himself the way he did. She thought about the 100 times she had watched him stand very still in a crowded room, and the small muscle in his jaw had worked, and she had known, even from across the room, that he was holding something back. She thought about the 3 weeks she had been carrying this secret, and the 1 week she had spent choosing the words she would use to tell him, and the fact that she would never now use them. At dawn, when the rain had finally thinned to a gray drizzle, she wrote 2 letters. The first was to her aunt's cousin, Mrs. Halvard, at Osquin, on the north coast, a widow of 60 with no children of her own, and a sharp tongue and a warm fire, who had told Isolde once at a garden party that any woman who found herself in difficulty was always welcome at her house, and no questions asked if she did not wish to answer them. Isolde had laughed at the time. She was not laughing now. She wrote the letter in a hand that she was surprised to find steady, and she asked to be received as a long-term guest under whatever pretext Mrs. Halvard thought best, and she signed her full name without disguising it. The second letter was harder. She addressed it to Alistair Caldermere, 7th Duke of Varnholt. She wrote, "You have my word that I will not contradict any account you choose to give of me. You have my word that I will not write to you again. You have my word that wherever I go, I will not trade on your name or seek redress from your family. In return, I ask only this: do not look for me." She did not sign it. She sealed both letters and gave them to her aunt's footman with instructions to post the first and burn the second. And her aunt, who had been watching her from the doorway, said nothing, and came and sat beside her on the window seat, and took her hand, and held it until the sun was fully up. "How far gone are you?" her aunt asked quietly. Isolde did not pretend not to understand. 11 weeks, she said. 12, perhaps. I cannot be sure. And he does not know. No. And you do not intend that he should know. No. Her aunt was silent for a long time. "You are braver than I would be," she said finally. "I hope, for your sake, that you are also wiser. Because if you are wrong about him, child, if you are wrong about what he would do, you will spend the rest of your life wondering." Isolde looked out at the square where the rain had stopped, and the first pale sun was catching the wet paving stones and turning them to gold. "I am not wrong," she said. But her hand, when she pressed it again against the small hidden weight beneath her nightgown, was trembling now, for the first time since she had stepped into the storm, and she did not know whether it was from cold or from grief, or from the first slow dawning awareness that she had just, with her own 2 hands, sent away the only witness to her own heart. Osquin sat on a cliff that fell 300 feet straight into the gray sea, and in every direction from Mrs. Halvard's house, the world was either water or wind or the low, twisted heather that was the only thing that grew in soil this thin. Isolde arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late October with 2 trunks and a cover story and a hollow space behind her ribs where her old life used to be. Mrs. Halvard, whose given name was Hortensia, and who refused to be addressed as anything else within the walls of her own house, took one long look at her as she stepped out of the hired carriage and said, "We will put you in the blue room. The blue room is furthest from the stairs and closest to the kitchen. You will eat when you are hungry, and sleep when you are tired, and speak when you have something to say. Agnes will show you up. I will not ask you a single question until you ask me one first. Is that understood?" "Yes," Isolde said. "Thank you." "Do not thank me. It is a small kindness, and it costs me nothing." But it was not a small kindness, and they both knew it, and Isolde's eyes filled, and Hortensia Halvard turned her back with the briskness of a woman who had no use for other people's tears, and walked into the house as if nothing had happened. The cover story was that Isolde was the widow of a naval lieutenant named Corin Brennick, who had died at sea 6 months before, and that she was at Osquin for her health, and that she preferred not to speak of her late husband because the loss was too recent. The story had the merit of being almost true. Corin Brennick had in fact been her cousin, and he had in fact drowned in the South Atlantic the previous spring, and his widow had in fact been a woman named Isolde, though that Isolde had remarried a tanner in Bristol and wanted nothing to do with the Brennick family any longer. Hortensia had constructed the entire fiction in a single afternoon at her writing desk, using 3 letters and a genealogical almanac, and by the time Isolde had been at Osquin a week, there was not a servant in the house, nor a neighbor within 10 miles, who did not believe that the quiet, dark-haired widow in the blue room was exactly what she said she was. For the first month, Isolde did almost nothing. She sat in the window of the blue room and watched the gulls and the cold sea, and she did not read, and she did not write, and she did not weep. The baby, when she thought of it, was a small, warm weight that anchored her to the floor of her own body and kept her from drifting away entirely. But she did not yet feel it move, and some nights she lay with her hand on her stomach, and she was afraid, and she did not know whether she was afraid that she would lose it or afraid that she would not. In the 2nd month, she began to go out. Hortensia sent her walking along the cliff path each morning with a stout stick and a shawl, and the instruction not to return until her cheeks were red, and Isolde obeyed because she had no other orders to follow. At first she hated the wind. By the 3rd week, she was walking 3 miles before breakfast, and the color had come back into her face, and the sleep had begun to come at night. And one morning, she stopped on the high point of the path and looked out at the sea and realized that for the space of perhaps 20 minutes, she had not thought of Alistair Caldermere at all, and she did not know whether to be relieved or to grieve. She grieved. It was, she understood by then, going to be grief for a very long time. Not the sharp kind. That had passed in the first 2 weeks. This was the other kind, the kind that lived under her ribs and went with her everywhere and made itself known in small, ordinary moments. When she saw a gentleman on horseback at a distance, and her heart jumped before her mind caught up. When she heard a voice in the village that sounded like his for 1/2 of 1 second. When she turned a page in a book and found a word he had once used in a letter and had to put the book down and wait for her breathing to steady. By the end of the 2nd month, she had begun to show. Not obviously. Not yet. But her dresses no longer fit the way they had, and Hortensia's seamstress came up from the village one afternoon with a bolt of soft gray wool and a tape measure, and she did not ask why the widow Brennick needed her bodices let out, and Isolde did not volunteer, and the matter was settled without a word being spoken aloud. It was in the 3rd month that the first letter came. Hortensia brought it to her at breakfast. It was addressed to Mrs. Brennick, Osquin, in a hand Isolde did not recognize, and the seal was plain wax with no crest, and her hands were shaking before she broke it. "Madam," the letter began, "you don't know me, but I have the honor of being a distant connection of your late husband's family. I find myself in the neighborhood of Osquin on a matter of business, which will detain me a fortnight, and I would be grateful for the opportunity to pay my respects to the widow of a man I admired greatly. I will call upon you on Thursday next, unless I hear from you that the intrusion would be unwelcome. I remain your obliged servant, Rothwell Kiverin." Isolde read it 3 times. She did not know the name. She had never heard Corin speak of a Kiverin, and she had known her cousin's family tolerably well before his marriage. The handwriting was elegant, practiced, the hand of a man who wrote a great many letters. The seal was deliberate in its plainness. The last line, "unless I hear from you that the intrusion would be unwelcome," was a formula that in her experience men used only when they already knew the answer would not be sent. "Do you know him?" she asked Hortensia. "Not personally, but I know the name. The Kiverins of Dunthorpe are an old family of the north. They were wealthy a generation ago. They are less so now. Why would such a man be in this neighborhood? I cannot imagine. Hortensia. Isolde." They looked at each other across the breakfast table. Hortensia's face was entirely calm, but her eyes were not, and Isolde understood that she had not been the only one at Osquin who had been waiting for the past to find her. "I will write and decline," Isolde said. "I would not." "Why not?" "Because if he has found you, he has found you. A refusal will not turn him away. It will only tell him that you are afraid, which is the one piece of information you must never under any circumstances give a man who has come looking for you uninvited. Receive him. Give him tea. Give him nothing else. Let him tell you what he wants, and when he has told you, send him away. And in the meantime, I will write to a cousin of mine at the Admiralty, who will tell me within a week whether Rothwell Kiverin has any legitimate connection to the Brennick family whatsoever, and if he does not, we will know precisely what kind of man has arrived at our door." Isolde sat with her hand curled around her teacup, and outside the window, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall, fine as powder, and she thought, "He has not sent anyone. This is not Alistair. This is something else, and I do not yet know what it is. But whatever it has found me." She folded the letter. "Thursday, then," she said. Rothwell Kiverin was 34 years old, tall, well-made, and handsome in the cold, sculptural way of a man who had been told he was handsome from boyhood and had built his understanding of himself around the information. He arrived at Osquin at precisely the appointed hour, which was the first thing Isolde noted, because in her experience, men who were not entirely in earnest tended to arrive either early or late. He handed his hat and coat to Agnes, with the easy courtesy of a man accustomed to being served. He bowed to Hortensia. He bowed more deeply to Isolde. He accepted tea. He was, she understood within the first 5 minutes of his visit, going to be a great deal more dangerous than she had expected. "Mrs. Brennick," he said, when the pleasantries had been discharged, "I hope you will forgive the presumption of my letter. The truth is that I have wanted to call upon you for some months, and I did not know, until recently, where you had gone. You wanted to call upon me. Yes. You will forgive me, sir, but I do not know you. I never heard my husband speak your name. I would not expect that you had. Corin and I were not close. We met only twice, at the house of a mutual uncle in Shrewsbury. But I admired him greatly, and when I heard of his death, I felt the loss keenly, and I wished to offer my condolences to his widow in person, and I was prevented from doing so at the proper time, by affairs of my own which I will not burden you with. That is all." It was a good answer. It was, in fact, an excellent answer. It accounted for the distance of the connection. It explained the delay. It required no further elaboration, and it ended in a polite closure that made it impossible to press for more without seeming rude. It was also, she was almost certain, a lie. She could not have said what told her so. Something in the small, precise way his eyes moved across her face while he spoke, taking her in like a man taking inventory. Something in the way he had bowed to Hortensia, which had been 1 degree too shallow, as if he had already assessed her importance and found her beneath his full courtesy. Something in the way he held his teacup, which was perfectly correct, and yet which he held a half-second longer than a man genuinely at ease would hold it, as if he were consciously performing ease rather than feeling it. She had lived for 2 years with a man who watched everyone in every room he entered, and she had learned from him, without ever meaning to, how to tell when she was being watched in the same way. She was being watched in the same way now. "I am grateful for your kindness, Mr. Kiverin," she said, "though I confess I find it difficult to speak of my husband. The loss is still recent. Of course, I would not dream of pressing you. You are in the neighborhood for a fortnight, you said." "Yes. A matter of land. A small property my father purchased some years ago has come under dispute, and I am here to see it settled. Tedious work, but it must be done." "And where is the property, if I may ask?" He smiled. It was a good smile, warm and slightly self-deprecating, the smile of a man who had been rehearsing it since he was 17. "Not 3 miles from your door, as it happens, at a place called Morin's Reach. Do you know it?" "I have walked past it." "Then we are practically neighbors." Practically. He set down his teacup and leaned forward a fraction, and everything in the room shifted. "Mrs. Brennick, I will not take up more of your morning than courtesy allows, but I will say this before I go. You strike me as a woman of uncommon composure, and I have found composure increasingly rare in the company I have been keeping of late. I would consider it a very great kindness if you would permit me to call again before I return south. I will bring no expectations. I will ask no questions you do not wish to answer. I will offer only conversation, and whatever small diversion my company might provide, a widow in a house of women. You are under no obligation to agree. But I ask." Every correct instinct in her body said, refuse him. Every practical instinct in her body said that a man who had come 300 miles under a false pretext would not be dismissed by a polite refusal, that refusing him now would simply make him more careful and more patient, that the only way to learn what he actually wanted was to let him believe she had not yet seen through him. She looked at Hortensia, who had not moved during the entire exchange, and whose face was as composed as it had been when she first poured the tea. "You may call on Monday," Isolde said, "at 11. "I'm obliged, madam. Deeply." He stood. He bowed. He collected his hat and coat from Agnes with the same practiced grace as before. He bowed once more at the door, this time including both of them equally. He walked down the front steps and mounted his horse and rode away up the road toward the village, and not once in all of that did he look back, which was the last piece of information she needed. Men who were calling innocently always looked back. The door closed. Hortensia set down her teacup with a small, definite click. "Well," she said, "he is not a connection of the Brennicks. No. And he is not here about a parcel of land. No. Then the question is what he is here about. And I confess, my dear, I have a very ugly suspicion." "So have I," said Isolde. "I think someone has sent him." "Yes. And I think the someone is not Alistair." "No. Alistair would not have sent this man." "Then who?" Hortensia did not answer at once. She rose and walked to the window of the drawing room and looked out at the road, down which Rothwell Kiverin had just ridden, and the snow was falling in earnest now, thick white flakes against the gray, and the hoofprints were already beginning to fill in. "There are two kinds of men," Hortensia said, "who come looking for a woman who has disappeared. The first is a man who loves her. The second is a man who believes she possesses something of value that he intends to take from her. Mr. Kieverin does not love you, my dear. He did not look at you like a man who loves. He looked at you like a man appraising a horse at market." Isolde's hand went to her stomach, and this time she did not take it away, because Hortensia had already seen the gesture 100 times, and because the thing she was hiding under her hand was suddenly, terribly, the most valuable thing in the world. "The heir," she said quietly. "Yes. Someone knows. Someone suspects, at least, which is very nearly the same thing. But who could know? I have told no one. I have written to no one. Even you did not know until I walked through your door. Someone in that house, my dear. Someone at Caldermere. A maid who noticed that you left a handkerchief behind one morning. A footman who counted the linens in a guest bedroom. A housekeeper who observed what a housekeeper observes. Or someone at your aunt's. Someone saw you clutch your stomach once when you thought you were alone. Someone heard you refuse wine at dinner 3 nights in a row. Someone saw the dressmaker arrive. A secret of this magnitude leaves a trail even when the keeper of it is careful. And you, my brave and foolish girl, have had 11 weeks in which to leave it." Isolde sat very still in the chair by the fire. Outside, the snow was coming down hard enough now that she could no longer see the road. "What does he want with the child?" she asked. "I do not know. It depends on who sent him. If it was a distant Caldermere cousin hoping to press a claim, he would want proof of paternity so that he could threaten Alistair with it. If it was one of the Thornvale family, seeking revenge for the broken alliance, he would want to expose you publicly so that the Duke's humiliation could be complete. If it was someone acting on his own initiative, hoping to marry you quickly and produce a child of ambiguous timing, he would want to persuade you into a union before the truth became plain. And which do you think it is?" "I think," said Hortensia slowly, "that Mr. Kieverin is a man who intends to propose marriage to you before the end of his fortnight, and that he is a man who believes the proposal will be accepted, and that the only question is which of the 3 motives I have just named is the one behind his confidence." Isolde stared into the fire. The child moved. It was the first time, a small flutter. Low and soft, no more than the wing of a moth brushing the inside of her. She had been told to expect it, had in fact been waiting for it for weeks, and she had been told it would feel like joy. It didn't feel like joy. It felt like a door closing behind her, and the faint, cold understanding that from this moment forward, there was no version of her life in which she was only responsible for herself. "He will not have us," she said aloud, to the fire, to the flutter, to the woman across the room who had taken her in without a single question. "Whoever he is, whoever sent him, he will not have us." Hortensia turned from the window. "No," she said, "he will not. But he will try, my dear. And you and I must now decide very carefully how we are going to make him regret that he did." Outside, the snow kept falling, and 300 miles to the south, in a London townhouse, where every fire had been lit and every lamp was burning, a letter was being opened, on a mahogany desk, by a man who had not slept properly in 11 weeks, and whose hand, as he read the first line, went very still. The letter on Alistair Caldermere's desk was 3 lines long and unsigned. "The woman you repudiated in October is at Osquain, on the north coast, under the name Brennick. She is with child. The child is yours. A gentleman of your acquaintance has called upon her and intends to marry her within the month." He read it 4 times. Then he did something he had not done in 11 weeks, which was pour himself a second glass of brandy before noon, and drink it standing at the window of the library that overlooked the square, where she had once stood, laughing at him for refusing to walk in the rain. The handwriting on the letter was a woman's. He was almost sure of it. The paper was ordinary, the ink ordinary, and the seal absent. Whoever had sent it had taken no particular care to conceal their identity, which meant either that they were fearless or that they wanted him to come looking. Both were equally probable. Both were, in the end, the same thing. He rang for his steward. "Varick, send for Mr. Thornby. Immediately. Tell him I require him here within the hour. Tell him it is a private matter and that he is to bring no one." "Yes, Your Grace." "And Varick, Your Grace, close the library door behind you, and don't open it again for any reason, and don't permit anyone to enter this room until Mr. Thornby arrives, including my father. Is that understood?" Varick, who had been in service to the Caldermere family for 31 years, and had seen 3 generations of dukes receive 3 generations of letters they did not wish to discuss, bowed without a word and closed the door. Alistair stood at the window and watched the pale winter sun move across the rooftops, and he thought, with the cold clarity of a man who has finally stopped lying to himself, that he had made a mistake of such magnitude that he was not certain it could ever be unmade, and that the only question now was whether he had the courage to attempt it anyway. When he had sent her away, he had told himself that he was protecting her. He understood now that he had been protecting himself, and that the protection had cost her everything, and that he had been carrying the knowledge of that cost in his chest for 11 weeks without ever once permitting himself to name it. She had clutched her stomach when she stood up from the chair. He had seen her do it, and he had noted it, and he had filed it away under the word distress, and he had let her walk out of his house in a storm without asking her the one question that would have changed the entire shape of both their lives. He had known, at some level beneath the level at which he was willing to think, he had known, and he had chosen not to know, because knowing would have required him to act in a direction his father had forbidden, and he had not yet been ready, that night, to defy his father. He was ready now. Halden Thornby arrived within the hour. He was a short, sharp-featured man of 40, with a reputation at the Inns of Court for being the most discreet solicitor in London, and he had handled 2 previous matters for Alistair, which were not the sort of matters that were written down in ledgers. He sat in the chair across the desk without being asked, accepted nothing to drink, and waited. Alistair pushed the letter across the desk. Thornby read it once, then he read it again. Then he set it down and folded his hands. "What do you wish me to do, Your Grace?" "I wish you to tell me who sent it. That will take time, possibly a great deal of time. Possibly I will not be able to tell you at all. Then I wish you to go to Osquin, on my behalf, immediately, and confirm that she is there. I do not wish you to approach her. I do not wish her to know that anyone has been sent. I wish you to verify the fact of her presence, the fact of her condition, and the identity of the gentleman who has called upon her. You will send me word by private courier the moment you have done so. You will tell no one, including Varick, including my mother, and above all, including my father, that any of this has occurred. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Grace." "One more thing. Your Grace, the gentleman, if you are able to learn his name before you send your report, include it. If you are able to learn what he wants from her, include that. If you are able to learn who sent him, include that as well. But you are not under any circumstances to approach him, or to approach her, or to permit either of them to become aware that any inquiry has been made. I will not have her frightened. She has been frightened enough." Thornby inclined his head. "I will leave within the hour." "Thank you." "Your Grace." "Yes. May I ask a question?" "You may. If the letter is accurate." "It is." Thornby did not react. "Then you must also permit me to ask what you intend to do, because the manner in which I approach this inquiry will depend upon the answer." Alistair looked at him. "I intend," he said slowly, "to go to the north coast as soon as you send word that she is safely there. And I intend to beg her forgiveness in whatever form she will accept it. And if she will have me, I intend to marry her quietly before the end of the month, in whatever parish church will hold a ceremony on short notice, and afterward I intend to inform my father by letter of what I have done. Is that sufficient instruction?" "It is, Your Grace." "Then go." Thornby rose. At the door he paused. "Your Grace, forgive me. One further observation. If another gentleman is indeed calling upon her with the intent of marriage, you should be prepared for the possibility that she may accept him. She does not know that you have seen the letter. She does not know that you have changed your mind. She has been alone for 11 weeks with a secret she believes you will never share. A woman in that circumstance may accept a proposal from a lesser man purely because a lesser man is present and a greater man is not." Alistair looked at him for a long moment. "Then I must be present," he said. "Go." The confession came that night, not to his father, not to anyone whose opinion of him he was obliged to consider. He rode out through the London streets at 9 in the evening to the quiet Bloomsbury townhouse of his Aunt Hesperia, the Dowager Countess of Merrick, who was 71 years old and had been the only person in his family who had ever told him the truth about himself since he was 12 years old. And he sat across from her in her small, overheated sitting room, and he told her everything. He told her about the concert. He told her about the 2 years. He told her about the letter that had been passed among the gentlemen of his father's acquaintance, and about the evening he had summoned Isolde to Caldermere House, and about the particular way she had clutched her stomach as she rose from the chair. He told her what he had said, and what she had said, and what he had failed to say, and why he had failed to say it. He told her about the 11 weeks since. He told her about the letter that had arrived that morning. He did not weep. He had not wept yet. He was not certain he was capable of it anymore. But his voice, once or twice, did something that was not quite his voice. And his aunt, who missed nothing, leaned forward at one of those moments and took his hand, and did not let go of it until he had finished. "Alistair," she said when he had stopped talking. "Aunt, you are a fool. Yes, you are the fool your father raised you to be, which is the worst kind of fool, because it is the kind that mistakes obedience for virtue and calls the mistake honor. But you are my sister's son, and I have loved you since the day you were born, and so I will tell you the truth, which is this. You have perhaps one chance to repair what you have done, and perhaps not even one. If you go to her and she will not see you, you must accept it, because you have earned it. If she will see you and will not marry you, you must accept that also. If she will marry you, but will not love you as she did before, you must accept that too, and count yourself more fortunate than you deserve. What you are not permitted to do, what I will not allow you to do, is go to her with the expectation of being forgiven. Do you understand me? Yes. Say it. I am not permitted to expect forgiveness. Good. And one thing more. Aunt. The child. Whether she lets you near it or not, whether you ever set eyes upon it or not, you will provide for it. Every month, every year. Through me if she will not permit it to come from you directly. I will set up the account tomorrow. You will fund it. Neither she nor the child will want for anything, not for a single day, for the rest of their lives. And this is not a kindness you are doing them. It is the smallest portion of a debt you will be paying for the rest of yours. Is that understood? Yes. Good. Now go home and sleep if you can, and wait for Thornaby's letter. And when it comes, go to her. And for God's sake, Alistair, Do not bring flowers. Bring yourself. Nothing else. Bring only yourself, and speak plainly. And if she sends you away, you will go. And if she asks you to stay, you will stay. And whatever she decides, you will honor. Because honor, it turns out, was never the thing your father taught you it was. He rode home through streets where the snow was beginning to fall, and he did not feel the cold. And for the first time in 11 weeks, the knot beneath his ribs had loosened by a single turn, and he understood that what had loosened it was not hope, because he did not yet have the right to hope, but something smaller and more honest, which was the first clean act of telling the whole truth to another human being about what he had done. Thornby's letter arrived on the 4th of February. It was 6 lines long. She is at Osquin, in the house of Mrs. Hortensia Halvard, widow, under the name Mrs. Corin Brennick. She is in good health and visibly with child, approximately 5 months advanced by my estimation. The gentleman calling upon her is Rothwell Kiverin of Dunthrope, who has no legitimate connection to any Brennick of which I am aware, and who has been seen twice in the last fortnight in private conversation with a servant of the Thornvale family at the coaching inn nearest the village. He has not yet made a formal proposal. I believe he intends to do so within the week. Alistair read it twice. Then he rang for Varick, and he ordered his fastest pair harnessed to the traveling carriage within the hour, and he ordered a valise packed with 3 days of clothing and nothing else. And he wrote 1 letter to his mother, and 1 to his aunt, and none at all to his father. And by 3 in the afternoon, he was on the North Road, with the cold winter light failing fast behind him, and 300 miles of hard traveling between himself and the woman he had sent away in a storm. He did not stop except to change horses. He slept in the carriage, or he did not sleep, and it made little difference. He ate what was handed to him at the inns where the horses were changed, and he did not taste it, and he did not speak more than necessary to any innkeeper or hostler along the way. And on the 3rd evening, with the sun setting red over a black sea, the carriage topped the last rise before the village of Osquin, and he saw, on a cliff 3 miles distant, the single-lit window of a gray stone house that he did not need to be told was hers. He did not go to the door. Not that night. He went to the village inn. He took a room in the name of a clerk from Leeds, which was the first he thought of. He sat in the common room with a plate of food he did not eat, and a glass of ale he did not drink, and he listened. On a night like this, in a place this small, the local gossip was the only entertainment on offer, and it had not taken long for Mrs. Brennick of Osquin and her southern gentleman caller to become the first topic of it. He is there again tomorrow, they say, 3rd time this week. Mrs. Halvard doesn't like him, mind. You can see it in her face. But Mrs. Brennick receives him. Polite as anything she is. They walk in the garden when the weather allows. A handsome fellow, him. Too handsome, if you ask me. I don't trust a gentleman that handsome who takes an interest in a widow. A pretty widow, though. A widow with a child coming. Well, yes. A widow with a child coming. And a handsome gentleman. And the child coming in perhaps 4 months by the look of her. And the gentleman not 3 months in the neighborhood. I don't say a word against Mrs. Brennick, mind. She's a lady. You can see it. But tongues will wag in a place this size, and they are wagging. Alistair paid his bill, and went upstairs to his room. He sat on the edge of the narrow bed, with his hands pressed flat against his knees, and he understood, with a new and sharper clarity, that he had arrived not a day too soon, and perhaps 1 day too late, and that tomorrow morning, if he was to have any chance at all, he would have to walk up to her door and knock on it without warning, and hope that she didn't have him turned away before she ever saw his face. He did not sleep that night either. At first light he was already dressed. The knock came at 10 minutes past 8 in the morning. Agnes answered it. Alistair had not given his name to the driver who brought him up from the village, and he had not rehearsed the name he would give at the door, and when Agnes opened it and stood staring at him with polite inquiry, he said only, "Please tell Mrs. Brennick that a visitor has come from London who asks a few minutes of her time." And he stepped back from the threshold and stood on the front steps in the freezing wind with his hat in his hands, like a tradesman awaiting payment. Agnes went away. She was gone a very long time. When she returned, she said, "Mrs. Halvard will see you first, in the front room, if you will follow me." He followed her. Hortensia Halvard was a woman he had never met, and he had perhaps 60 seconds to form his impression of her, and in those 60 seconds, he understood that every decision of the next hour was going to pass through her before it ever reached Isolde. And he understood also that she had already decided what she thought of him, and that nothing he said was going to change her mind. She did not rise when he entered. She did not offer him a seat. She waited with her hands folded in her lap, very calm, and she studied him without blinking for a full 20 seconds before she spoke. "You are the Duke of Varnholt." "Yes, madam." "And you have come to see my guest." "If she will permit it." "She has not yet decided whether she will permit it." "I understand." "You will not be receiving a decision from me. I am not her keeper. I will ask her when we are finished, and if she says no, you will leave this house, and you will not return under any pretext, and I will make it my personal business to ensure that every man in this parish understands the circumstances under which you departed. Is that clear, Your Grace?" "Entirely, madam." "Good. Now sit down." He sat. She looked at him for another long moment. "I'm not here to judge you, Your Grace. That office belongs to the person upstairs. I am here to ask you one question, and your answer will determine whether I speak on your behalf to her or not. Are you here because you have discovered that she is with child, or are you here because you have discovered that you love her?" He had not expected the question. He had expected a great many questions, and he had rehearsed answers for most of them through 3 nights in a carriage. But he had not expected this one, and because he had not expected it, he did not have a rehearsed answer, and so he told her the truth. "I discovered that I loved her," he said, "approximately 4 hours after I sent her away, madam. I discovered that she was with child 11 weeks later, by an anonymous letter that arrived on my desk last Tuesday. I came north the same day. I did not come because of the child, though the child is a part of why I could no longer bear my own silence. I came because 11 weeks ago I did a thing I cannot take back, and I have not drawn a full breath since. And I understood, when the letter came, that I had been given one opportunity to attempt a correction, and that if I did not take it, I would not deserve another. The child is hers, madam, not mine. Whatever she decides about the child, she decides. I am here only for her. I have no claim. I am making none." Hortensia Halvard looked at him for another long moment. Then she rose. "Wait here," she said. She left the room. He waited. He could hear, through the floor above, footsteps crossing slowly from one end of a corridor to another, and then a door closing, and then silence. And he sat very still in the unfamiliar chair, with his hands flat on his knees, and his eyes fixed on the pattern of the rug, and he counted. He had reached 640 when the door opened again. Hortensia Halvard stood in the doorway. "She will see you," she said, "in the small parlor, upstairs, at the end of the passage. You will go alone. You will leave the door open. You will not touch her. You will not raise your voice. You will say what you have come to say, and you will listen to what she tells you. And when she tells you to go, you will go. Am I understood?" "Yes, madam." "Then go." He climbed the stairs. The small parlor at the end of the passage had a fire in the grate, and 2 chairs turned toward it, and one of the chairs was occupied, and she did not turn her head when he entered the room. "Isolde." She did not answer. She was sitting very straight, with her hands folded on her lap, and she was not looking at the fire, and she was not looking at the window, and she was not looking at him. She was looking at the middle distance between all three, with the particular blank expression of a woman who has decided in advance that she will give away nothing. And she was wearing a soft gray wool dress that had been altered to accommodate the unmistakable shape of her, and his breath stopped in his chest when he saw it, and he had to hold on to the back of the other chair for a moment before he could go on. "I will stand," he said, "unless you tell me to sit. Stand or sit. It is not my house. Isolde, why are you here? A letter was sent to me, anonymous. It told me where you were, and it told me what you had not told me, and it told me that a gentleman was calling on you with the intent of marriage. And so you came to prevent it. No, I came because I have been wrong about everything for 11 weeks, and I have come to say so. I am not here to prevent anything. I am here to ask you to hear me. That is all. If you tell me to leave after I have spoken, I will leave. If you tell me never to contact you again, I will not contact you again. I give you my word, and you already know what my word is worth, which is why I am prepared to be told it is worth nothing." She did not look at him. "Speak then," she said. "You have 5 minutes." He spoke. He did not sit down. He told her, as plainly as he could, what had happened after she left that night, and what his father had done, and what his aunt had said, and what he had understood of himself in the week since. And he told her, very quietly, that he had seen her hand go to her stomach as she rose from the chair and had not asked, and that the not asking had been the worst act of his life, and that he would not now pretend otherwise, and that he had ridden 3 days and 3 nights to say so, and that he was here not to reclaim anything, but to offer whatever remained of him, in whatever form she would have it, for as long as she would have it, with no condition and no expectation of a reply. He did not ask her to marry him. He had decided, somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd change of horses on the North Road, that he would not ask her that today. Not in this room, not in this hour, because to ask her would be to put a weight on her that she had not yet indicated she could carry, and he had not come here to add weight. When he had finished, he stood in silence and waited. She had not looked at him once. She did not look at him now. "Alistair, yes. You saw my hand. Yes. And you did not ask. No. You did not ask because you did not want to know. Yes. Say it." He closed his eyes. "I did not ask because I did not want to know. Because if I had known, I could not have done what I did. And I had decided to do what I did before you arrived. And so I chose not to know." Silence. A log settled in the grate with a small, bright sound. "The child moved for the first time," she said, "the afternoon Mr. Keverin first called. I sat in this chair, and I felt it, and I understood that whatever happened next, I was no longer the only person who was going to pay for what you had decided that night. That is not a reproach. It is information. I thought you should have it. Thank you. Do not thank me. Isolde, I have not decided anything. Do you understand me? I have not decided whether I will speak to you again after today. I have not decided whether I will permit you to see this child when it is born. I have not decided whether I believe a word of what you have just said. You are here, and you have spoken. And now I need you to leave this room, because I cannot breathe in it while you are standing in it. And if I cannot breathe, then I cannot think, and I need very badly to be able to think. I will leave. Good. Where may I wait? What? Where may I wait? While you think. I will wait wherever you tell me to. The village, the inn, the road outside. Tell me where, and I will go there, and I will be there until you send for me, or until you send word that I am not to be sent for. Either of those. She looked at him for the first time. It was only for a second. Her eyes caught his and held them and then broke away, but it was enough. And in that second, he saw that whatever else she had or had not decided, she had not yet stopped loving him. And he understood at the same moment that she knew he had seen it, and that the knowledge of his having seen it had made her furious, because it was the one thing she had resolved not to show him. "The inn," she said coldly. "Go to the inn. I will send word tomorrow morning. Whatever the word is, you will honor it." "I will." "Go." He bowed, very slightly, and he walked out of the room, and he walked down the stairs, and he walked past Hortensia Halvard, who was standing in the hall with her arms folded, and who did not speak to him as he passed, and he walked out of the house and down the path to where the hired trap was waiting, and he rode back to the village, and he took his room at the inn again, and he sat on the edge of the bed in exactly the position he had sat the night before, and he waited. The message that arrived at the inn that afternoon was not the message he was expecting. It came at 4 in the afternoon, carried by a boy from Osquin on a pony, and it was sealed with plain wax, and when he opened it, he found 2 lines in Hortensia Halvard's hand. "Mr. Kyverin has called unexpectedly. He is in the drawing room now. Come at once, by the back way, and do not be seen from the road." He was out of his room, and down the stairs, and into the trap within 2 minutes, and he told the boy to take him by the cliff road, and not by the village, and the boy, who had clearly been told what to do, nodded once and touched his heels to the pony's flanks, and they went. They came up to Osquin from the side. Hortensia was waiting at the kitchen door. "He arrived an hour ago, unannounced. He has asked to speak to her privately. She has agreed. I am standing in this doorway because I cannot think of any pretext to put myself in that room, and I will not embarrass her by refusing on her behalf. But I do not like the look of him today. He has been drinking. Not much. Enough. Come with me." She led him along the back passage, past the kitchen, past the pantry, up a narrow servant's stair, and along a corridor on the first floor that ran parallel to the drawing room below. At the end of the corridor was a small landing with a door, and beside the door was a narrow grille set into the wall at about waist height, the kind of feature that old houses sometimes contained, so that a housekeeper could judge the progress of a meeting in the room below without interrupting it. "Do not speak," she said. "Do not move. Listen." He knelt beside the grille. Below him, in the drawing room, Rothwell Kyverin was speaking. "You will not pretend, Mrs. Brennick, that you do not understand what I am offering you. I have been patient. I have been courteous. I have presented myself 3 times now, in a manner that ought to have left no doubt whatsoever in your mind as to my intentions. I am offering you a name for the child. I am offering you a future that does not involve raising a bastard in a rented house on a cliff with a woman 35 years your senior as its only witness to respectability. I am offering to marry you within the fortnight, quietly in a parish, where no one knows who either of us is. And I am offering to date our acquaintance to a period sufficient to make the timing of the child unremarkable to anyone who might in future take an interest. I am offering, in short, to rescue you. And I am growing somewhat tired, madam, of being made to repeat the offer." Alistair's hand closed into a fist on the floorboards. Hortensia, behind him, laid one finger lightly on his shoulder, and the touch was a command. "Wait." Isolde's voice, when she answered, was so quiet he had to strain to hear it through the grille. "Mr. Kyverin, who sent you?" A pause. "I do not take your meaning, madam." "I take mine perfectly. You are not a friend of my late husband's family. I have confirmed that you have no connection to the Brennicks of any description. I have had the kindness of a cousin in the Admiralty to thank for the confirmation. You are not in this neighborhood on a matter of land, because I have ridden 3 times past Morin's Reach in the last fortnight, and there is no dispute, and no solicitor, and no sign whatsoever that any inquiry is being made. You have been sent. I wish to know by whom. The silence below went on for a long time. Then Kivrin laughed. It was a short, dry, unpleasant laugh, and it was the first honest sound he had made in Alistair's hearing. You are sharper than I was told. Very well. I was sent by Lord Felbrith Thornvale, madam, the father of the young lady whose marriage to the Duke of Varnholt was broken off in your favor. Lord Thornvale is a man who does not forgive easily, and he has spent 3 months looking for the woman who cost his daughter her future. He paid for my journey, he paid for my lodgings, and he has promised to pay me a very considerable sum indeed if I return south with either a signed declaration of paternity in your hand or a marriage license with my own name on it in place of any other that might complicate the Duke's future. Either will suffice for his purposes. He does not much care which. I confess I preferred the second option. You are a handsome woman. The arrangement would not have been unpleasant. Alistair could not breathe. Below, Isolde's voice, still quiet, still steady, and if I give you neither. Then I return south with nothing, and Lord Thornvale releases to the newspapers the account he has already prepared of your association with the Duke, which includes the date on which you left London, and the month in which your child is due, and the public arithmetic will do the rest. The Duke will be finished. You will be finished. The child, when it is born, will be finished also, in any sense that matters to the sort of people who keep such accounts. I do not wish this, madam. I am giving you the kinder option. I hope you will consider it. Get out of this house. Madam, get out of this house, Mr. Kivrin, before I have you removed from it. You will regret this. Get out. The sound of a chair being pushed back, footsteps, the slam of a door. On the landing above, Alistair Caldermere, 7th Duke of Varnholt, who had thought at the top of the stairs that he had already experienced every possible form of rage a man could contain, discovered that he had been wrong about that, and he rose from his knees, and Hortensia's hand closed hard on his wrist. Not yet, she whispered. Not in this house. You will follow him, and you will catch him on the road, where no one can see you from the windows, and you will end this, quietly, and you will come back here, and you will not speak to her again until she has had the night to know that he is gone. Do you understand me? He looked at her. He nodded once, and he turned, and he went down the back stairs, and he took the trap, and he went after Rothwell Kivrin on the cliff road, while the sun was dropping red and heavy into the sea behind him, and the wind had begun to rise again. And somewhere in the house behind him, Isolde Brennick had sat down very slowly in the chair by the fire, with both her hands pressed flat against the child she carried, and she was weeping for the first time in 11 weeks. He caught Kivrin at the bend in the cliff road, where the land drops away on the seaward side, and there is no cover for half a mile in any direction, which was a piece of good fortune he did not question and did not waste. He stopped the trap crosswise in the road. Kivrin, on horseback, reined up hard. Stand aside, sir. Get down. I beg your pardon. Get down from that horse, Mr. Kivrin, or I will pull you off it. Kivrin squinted against the light, and then, very slowly, he understood who was standing in the road in front of him, and his face underwent a change that was almost interesting to watch. Your Grace, get down. He got down. Alistair did not strike him. He had considered it on the drive. He had decided against it. A struck man becomes a story. And the last thing he required in this hour was a story. And so he did something else instead, which was to close the distance between them until Kivrin could feel his breath, and to speak at a pitch just above a whisper, and to say a number of things very rapidly and very clearly that no third party overheard, and at the end of which Rothwell Kivrin of Dunthrope, who had arrived at the bend in the road as a man confident of his errand, departed from it as a man who understood with perfect clarity that his life, his family's remaining property, and the entirety of his social future depended upon his being out of the county by dawn and out of England by the end of the week, and who also understood that the Duke of Varnholt possessed the specific documents necessary to make each of these conditions enforceable, because those documents had been gathered by Holden Thornby over the course of the previous fortnight and were at this moment in a locked box in the Duke's carriage at the inn. Kivrin did not argue. He mounted his horse. He rode north. Alistair watched him go until he was out of sight around the next bend in the cliff, and then he stood for a long moment in the road, with the wind pulling at his coat. And then he got back into the trap, and he told the boy to take him back to Osquin. Hortensia met him at the kitchen door. He is gone. He is. For good. For good. You did not strike him. No. I am sorry to hear it. Go upstairs. She is in the small parlor. She knows you went after him. She has been waiting. He went upstairs. Isolde was in the same chair. Her eyes were red. She did not pretend otherwise. Is it done? She said. It is done. He will be out of the country within the week. He will not write. He will not speak. He will not so much as think of either of us again in any manner that can be traced. And Lord Thornvale? I will deal with him when I return to London. He will find that his account does not reach the newspapers, and he will find that his remaining investments in 2 joint ventures with my family are no longer viable, and he will find that the clubs he most values have become unavailable to him, and he will find, in short, that the business of vengeance is a great deal more expensive than the business of forbearance. He will learn these things in the order I choose. He will not contest them. She looked at him. You came here to say something you did not say this morning. I did. Say it. He did not kneel. He did not take her hand. He had been instructed not to touch her, and he was not going to break that instruction. Not for this. Not until she invited him to. He stood in front of her chair with his hands at his sides, and he spoke. I love you. I have loved you since the concert. I knew it then. I did not have the courage to say it for 2 years, and then I had the cruelty to send you away. And then I had the cowardice to let you go 11 weeks without a word from me. I am not fit to be your husband. I know that. I am asking anyway. I am asking because my aunt told me that I must bring myself and nothing else, and because what I am is the thing I am asking you to consider, and I have no illusions about what that thing is worth. Marry me, Isolde. Marry me in the village church tomorrow, or marry me in London in a month, or marry me at any time and in any place you choose, and I will spend the rest of my life learning to deserve the 5 minutes in which you decide to say yes. And if you will not marry me, I will provide for you and for the child for as long as I have breath, and I will do it without condition, and I will not contact you again except at your invitation. Those are the only 2 offers I have. I will stand here while you choose between them. Silence. A long silence, long enough for the fire to dim by 1 log, long enough for her to close her eyes and open them and close them again. Come here, she said. He came. Kneel down. He knelt. Give me your hand. He gave her his hand. She placed it, very carefully, flat against the curve of her beneath the soft gray wool, and she held it there, and he did not move. And beneath his palm, after a moment, there came a small, definite thump, and then another, and then a third, as if the child had been waiting to be asked. He made a sound that was not a word. Isolde looked down at him. I will marry you, she said quietly. Not tomorrow. Not yet. I need a little time, a month perhaps. I need to be sure, in daylight, that I am choosing this, and not merely being relieved of the alternative. You will stay in the village. You will call every day. You will not press me, and you will not bring flowers. and you will not bring anything at all except yourself. And at the end of the month, if I am still certain, we will go to the parish church here, and we will be married quietly, and we will go home together. And you will tell your father after, not before. Do you agree to these terms? Yes. Then go back to the inn, Alistair. I am very tired, and the child is very tired, and I cannot do any more of this tonight. He rose. At the door he stopped. Isolde. Yes. Thank you. She closed her eyes. Do not thank me yet, she said. Thank me in a year. He went. The scandal broke on the 11th of March, 4 days before the wedding, exactly as Lord Felbrith Thornvale had promised it would, though by then, the account he had prepared for the London newspapers had already been answered by 3 others that Alistair's aunt had quietly placed in friendlier hands a week earlier. The first named the woman, the others named the circumstances. The fourth, published in a respectable morning paper on the same day, was a plain statement from the Duke of Varnholt himself, announcing his forthcoming marriage to Miss Isolde Brennick of Caldermere, acknowledging without apology the irregularity of the courtship and the child she was carrying, and informing any gentleman who wished to raise objection that the Duke would be pleased to receive him in person at any reasonable hour. No gentleman called. 1 or 2 wrote letters that were never answered. The clubs of which Lord Thornvale was a member received quiet notice from their committees that his subscription would not be renewed for the coming season, and by the end of the week, the matter, as a social matter, was finished, not because London had forgiven it, but because London had understood that the Duke was not asking for forgiveness. They were married on the 15th in the small parish church at Osquin, with the sea wind loud against the windows and 7 people present. Hortensia Halvard gave the bride away. Halden Thornby stood as witness. The vicar was an old man with very cold hands, who had not married a couple in 6 years, and he performed the ceremony as if he remembered every word of it perfectly, which he did. Isolde wore a dress of deep green wool because it was warm and because she liked it. She carried no flowers because Alistair had been instructed not to bring any, and had abided by the instruction. When it was her turn to speak, she spoke quietly and without hesitation. When it was his turn, he spoke more quietly still, and his voice did the thing it had done in his aunt's sitting room in Bloomsbury, and he did not try to hide it this time, and no one in the small, cold church pretended not to notice. They went home together that afternoon. Home was a small rented house above the harbor that Alistair had taken for 3 months, while Caldermere was being prepared to receive them, and they went to it, not in a carriage, but on foot, and the villagers on the road nodded to them as they passed, and that was the whole of it. And by nightfall, Isolde was asleep in a bed she had never slept in before, and Alistair was sitting in a chair beside her with one hand loosely curled around hers, and he did not sleep at all, and he did not mind. His father did not write. His mother did at length, and the letter was short and kind, and contained nothing that required a reply, and he did not reply, and she did not expect him to. The child was born in the 2nd week of June, a daughter. She arrived after 14 hours of hard labor in the same blue room at Osquin, where Isolde had sat for her first month of exile watching the gulls, and when she was set into her mother's arms, Isolde said only, "Oh, there you are," as if the child had been a person she had been expecting to meet for some time, which in a sense she had. They named her Maren Hortensia Caldermere. The first name was Isolde's mother's. The second was for the woman who had opened a door in a storm without asking a single question. Alistair, who had been permitted into the room after the worst of it was over, held his daughter for the first time sitting on the edge of the bed with his wife's hand against his back, and he did not weep this time either, but he sat very still for a long time, and when he finally spoke, he said, not to the child, but to Isolde, "I am sorry I was not here when you felt her move the first time." And Isolde said, You were standing on the cliff road arguing with a man who was about to leave the country. You were here. I simply had not told you yet." Maren, who was 5 days old before she did anything her parents found remarkable, opened her eyes and looked at her father. She did not look away. That winter, when Maren was 6 months old and the first heavy snow of the year came down over Osquin in earnest, Alistair carried her to the window of the blue room, wrapped in a shawl that had been Hortensia's mother's, and he stood there with her a long time while Isolde watched from the doorway. He was telling the child something. Isolde could not hear what. She did not need to. She understood, watching the line of his shoulders against the gray afternoon light, that her husband was explaining the sea to his daughter, and that the explanation was taking a very long time because he was also, in a manner he could not have articulated, explaining himself. Hortensia died the following spring, quietly in the chair by her own fire, with a book open in her lap and a half-finished letter to Isolde on the table beside her. She had written 3 lines. "My dear, the child is the image of you at that age, which is to say she will be formidable. Tell her when she is old enough that the door of this house was the easiest door I ever opened, because I had been keeping it open for you since." The sentence stopped there. No one would ever know how Hortensia Halvard had intended to finish it. Isolde kept the unfinished letter in the drawer of her writing desk for the rest of her life, and she never showed it to anyone, not even to Alistair. And on the hardest days, she would take it out and read what was there, and imagine the rest. 2 years on. It was a gray Thursday in March, and the rain was against the windows of the small morning room at Caldermere House, and Isolde sat in the window seat with Maren asleep against her shoulder, and Alistair stood in the doorway with a letter in his hand, which he had not opened. "From your father," she said. "Yes." "The first in 2 years." "Yes." "Are you going to open it?" He looked at the letter. Then he looked at her, and at the child against her, and at the rain running down the pane behind them, and at the small, round, wet world of that room with the fire in the grate, and the soft gray light, and everything in it that he had not known. 2 years ago, he was even capable of wanting. "Not today," he said. He set the letter down on the side table unopened, and he crossed the room, and he sat on the window seat beside her, and he lifted Maren gently from her shoulder onto his own, and the child did not wake, and the rain kept on, and outside, somewhere far down the square, a carriage passed with its lamps, lit in the gray afternoon, and was gone again. "Do you remember," Isolde said, "what you said to me the last time it rained like this?" "Yes." "You said I had no choice." "I know." "You were wrong, Alistair. I know that too. I had a choice that night. I made it. I chose not to tell you. I chose to go alone. I chose to walk into a storm carrying something you did not know I carried. And I chose it because I believed I was saving you. And I was. And you were saving me. And neither of us knew we were doing it. And it very nearly cost us everything." He was silent for a moment. "What do we do with that?" "Nothing. We do nothing with it. We let it be the thing that happened, and we remember it when we need to, and the rest of the time we do this. This. The morning room, the rain, the child asleep. Your hand on mine. This is the thing we chose in the end. Every day we choose it again. That is the whole of it." He looked down at his daughter. He looked at his wife. "He sent me away in the storm," she said quietly. "To no one, or perhaps to the child, or perhaps to the window. And he did not know I carried his heir. And now he knows. And now she is here. And now we are here. And the storm is just weather." The fire settled in the grate. Outside, the rain went on. "Thank you for walking this road with Isolde and Alistair. From the night he sent her into a storm he thought he understood, to the quiet afternoon 2 years later when the storm was only weather again. Their story was not about a man who saved a woman. It was about a woman willing to be lost to save the man she loved, and a man who, far too late, discovered that the only thing worth being saved from was his own silence. Every choice they made, the hard ones and the wrong ones, and the ones that cost them 11 weeks of grief, was still a choice. It was never the storm. It was never the duty. It was always the choosing. If this story moved you, if you held your breath when she stood in the rain on the front step of Caldermere House, if you felt the flutter when the child moved for the first time in the blue room at Osquin, if you wanted to reach into the page and shake him awake 11 weeks earlier, then please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell, because more stories are waiting, more storms worth weathering, more impossible loves, more quiet morning rooms at the end of long, hard roads.